you can't study historic cycles, the rise and fall of empires and market cycles, and not see value in holding the one asset that stood the test of time literally for 5,000 years. It doesn't mean it's going to in another 1,000, but 5,000 years is a pretty good track record. It's daunting when you don't know who the enemy is or what the rules are. And we were robbed of any kind of certainty over the last 3 years, right? That was removed from our scope. And humans don't operate super well. And we don't know what next week might look like in terms of basic freedoms.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for December 6th through December 13th, 2022, while supplies last. This week we have a double feature on Canadian maples. 2022 silver maples are just $6.25 over spot, while backdated silver maples are just $6.05 over spot, while this shipment lasts. Silver maples are produced by the famed Royal Canadian Mint, and were the first silver coins to be minted at 4 nines fine purity. And they remain one of the purest, most respected, and most recognized silver bullion coins today. Again, the 2022 silver maples are just $6.25 over spot, while backdated maples are $6.05 over spot. They come in tubes of 25, monster boxes of 500, and are IRA eligible. If you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us. We'll be happy to help you in that process. Our number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to Liberty and Finance. We have a first-time guest today who a lot of you will recognize because he's got one of the hottest channels out there on YouTube and many other platforms as well. It's the Jay Martin Show, and we'll be talking to the founder, Jay Martin, right now. Jay, thanks for joining us for this first time on Liberty and Finance this Thursday, December 1st, 2022.
It's my pleasure, Dunnigan. I'm looking forward to this.
We got connected because many of our viewers have been asking or referencing, hey, I saw this person on Jay Martin's show. This is what Jay Martin's talking about, that sort of thing. So I got plugged in, subscribed to you, and among a lot of other people that have been subscribing to you, you're growing a very fast community there. And we'd like to first touch briefly on that, what got you into it and what's driving you, but then talk about a specific question that's been on my mind after watching you interview some very, very high-profile guests, really world-class guests on your channel, and asking some penetrating questions that in some cases kind of push the boundaries of what we can talk about yet on some of these major social media platforms. So, at any rate, could you help us, people who haven't met you yet, understand what got you into this world of being a podcaster and video journalist, and what drives you now? What are you trying to accomplish with the Jay Martin Show?
Yeah, certainly, Dunnigan. And once again, thanks for having me. Yeah, I host a show named after myself called The Jay Martin Show, and we publish on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iTunes. We're on a handful of other podcast platforms, like SoundCloud, I'm not sure where else, but, I started producing video in the spring of 2020 because, as we all remember, the sky was falling quickly, and every single day, such a surreal point in time to think about, right? Like March, April, May, June in 2020, every single day we were hit with like this show-stopping headline that usually would have stopped the presses on alone, but, at that point, it was every day was a new one. And whether it was an international border closing or entire cities falling into quarantine or all kinds of crazy stuff, and markets were in free fall. And it was very clear to me that our world was changing very, very quickly and would soon become unrecognizable. And I knew that it's those moments that absolutely make or break, but often make investors, right? If you can position yourself correctly through those points of coordinated global crises, that can change your life, right? That's how you add 2 zeros to your net worth right there. And so I just thought, I'd been producing investment conferences for the previous decade. And I thought, I want to talk to everybody right now, all the smart money, find out what they're doing with their bank accounts and their wallets. And so I started the podcast and YouTube channel with that intention. It was like, let's have every fund manager, every analyst, every private high net worth individual that I've met over the previous decade on the show, because I want to know where they are allocating capital today. Right? What are they doing right now while the world's in free fall? And that's how it started. And, people subscribed, I think, because they resonated with the goal. I'm a retail investor, just like my audience. I'm just looking for the smartest home for my cash. I'm sector agnostic. I don't love any asset. I definitely favor some, but I know the asset's not going to love me back. So I try my hardest not to get dogmatic or evangelical about anything. My audience is very much just like me, retail investors looking for the smartest home for their cash as I go on that journey. And it evolved over the years. It's become more of a pursuit of holistic personal sovereignty that begins with a solid foundation of financial confidence. Then I branch into psychological confidence and physical confidence. And I kind of, explain them all the same. It's your ability to weather a storm or handle a crisis, right? We know what physical confidence might be. It's your ability to handle a crisis. You know what that might be. What about your financial confidence? Can you handle a crisis? Are you built to weather a storm? Did you build a moat before you built a castle? And too frequently, people try to build castles first and they fall. So, that inspired the journey, and that's still what I do today.
While you were describing that progression, you went from the financial aspect to the personal sovereignty aspect. Ironically, if you flip those around, the name of our channel, Liberty and Finance, Liberty again is about personal sovereignty, and we focus on the individual, on the family, on the community, on the state, and certainly that's in contrast to sort of this globalist vision that's been kind of thrust upon humanity, it seems, over the past 2.5 years, especially. That wasn't when it started. You could see threads of that going way back. But anyway, so that's the liberty and the sovereignty, the freedom part. Interesting that you brought in health and everything else together with that, because there's so much more than just physical preparedness that needs to be in place. And then the financial part, that's we backed into that because with our start as being reluctant preppers, we were talking about awareness and preparedness, and it became clear that one of the most pressing concerns that people had about major risk to their family's well-being going forward was financial, because of the runaway everything in our financial world that people know about. In fact, I guess that's what I wanted to shift to talking about, but it just resonated with me when you talked about those two foci, because that's where we've come down to as well, is making sure you've got freedom as an individual and as a family, and then how to support your community and so on, but then also having that financial focus, because that's just one of the main real concerns and real opportunities that we are faced with right now. Interesting. Well, so getting back to our original intent for this particular conversation, as I watched you interview several of these headliner guests, I thought, wow, Jay has really been able to pull together some big thinkers who are coming at life and some of these questions from some similar and sometimes widely divergent viewpoints. And you can't help, when you're in the seat of the interviewer asking these questions, you can't help but kind of start to use the insights that you're gaining to build kind of this composite picture of kind of a heat map of what's really of grave concern right now, what do people need to know more about that they're not hearing about, versus maybe where there's some opportunities and promise. So could we take those two maybe one at a time? If you could first reflect on, and for our audience, share what maybe your 1, 2, or 3 most concerning awarenesses are that you feel that you've gained through the process of what you do on the Jay Martin Show in talking with these headliner guests in the past year here. What have emerged to you as real concerns, perhaps real and present dangers or trends that you think people need to be paying closer attention to if they're not already, that really emerge to the top of your mind at the end of the year here and looking forward to the next year?
Okay, good question. So in terms of takeaways from a lot of the guests, you're right. The benefit of interviewing like a super wide variety of money managers, investors, analysts, entrepreneurs, all of it, is that you hear a new perspective every single time. And if I interview 100 different investment pros, or, I shouldn't say investment pros, because there's a lot of investment professionals that are not good investors. What I will say is that we do a lot of diligence to make sure the track records of those we have on the show, professional or not, are sound. And you could sit down with 100 different people, you'll hear 100 different strategies, 100 different forecasts and predictions, and explanations about why what just happened. And so what do you really learn from that? You learn that no one really knows, right? And that that could and should maybe bring you a bit of peace, because we tend to stress and rush towards trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And the way that we do that typically is by explaining what just happened, right? And hindsight's always 2020. We can look at what just occurred. We can then, apply logic to it and say, oh yeah, this happened because of this, right? Even though we're rarely correct in that case, and then project that thesis forward, usually to our own detriment. And forecasts and predictions sell really well in financial media, so people are quick to put them out there. I put very little confidence in any of them. And that's not to say that, you shouldn't try, but I think acknowledging first and foremost that you're just as likely going to be wrong as you're going to be right is probably the most important lesson that I've learned as an investor. Because what that did for me is it forced me to say, okay, if I've done all my diligence, I'm following the smart money, I believe in this entrepreneur, I've got all the confidence in the world that this is a smart bet, whatever that bet is, I still have to acknowledge that I might be blindsided by things I don't understand, right? What's the quote? It's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that just ain't so. And that smacks investors around. And so anyways, how do you deal with that? You build a base, right? You build the moat, like I said, before you try to build that next turret on the castle. And so, I think rule number one is stay alive, right? It's stay at the table. And so, whatever I'm putting out there in the speculative arena where I like to invest, that's where I spend the bulk of my time. I have to know with confidence that if I lose it all, tomorrow's not really going to be that different for me. And what that means is I have to have a disproportionately large, heavier weighted, stable side of that barbell, right? And so, and that's, I think that came with a lot of hard lessons. And just how could 100 smart people who have great track records all say something different about what might happen next? Well, it's because it's a lottery, right? It just has to be. Yeah. And, we got onto the mindset thing and the health thing, because the further you go down trying to become a better investor and picking apart the brains of those who have really rocked it and made great decisions for 20, 30 years and survived volatile cycles, what I eventually came to believe is that investing is more about managing your decision-making and your psychology than it is about managing your money. And that's all we're doing here is like trying to understand and protect ourselves from our own biases, our own heuristics, our intuition, right? Intuition, like trust your gut, sure. But what is that actually? It's just an algorithm, right? That is created by whatever inputs you have, whatever news you read, life experience you have, relationships that are in your life. That's what intuition is. And everyone has different inputs. So how could that be reliable, right? And questioning that, stepping back emotionally and just being the relentless skeptic has really helped me. And so if investing is just managing decision-making, then how do you strengthen your mind, right? And I just believe, diet and exercise for me come first. If I'm going to think well, I have to feel well, right? And so I got to tick those two boxes first. So it is the health bucket first. That gets me into the psychology bucket, and that helps me with the financial bucket. And that's how the three play together. In terms of like, what are people, or what, you asked, what am I most concerned about, right? Or what am I seeing?
I guess it's not just what you're the most concerned about, because maybe we're all concerned about some big thing that everybody's already thinking about and already talking about. I guess what I was trying to get in on was, what do you suspect might be things that people should be paying more attention to or hearing more about, because they're not being told in the places where it's easy to get information. They're not being told what they need to know about something that you've come to believe is quite important.
Well, at risk of sounding cliche, I firmly believe the gold narrative is severely misunderstood and undervalued. And what I mean by that is that, I'm in my 30s and I own physical gold as my savings. Typically, when I tell somebody this, they assume I'm some conspiracy theorist, off-grid prepper, right? And that I must be some dogmatic gold bug, which is wild to me, because I also own real estate, crypto, cash, equities. No one's calling me a real estate bug, but if you own a little bit of gold, often they're like, you're a gold bug. It's like, no, I study history. I mean, you can't study historic cycles, the rise and fall of empires and market cycles, and not see value in holding the one asset that stood the test of time literally for 5,000 years. It doesn't mean it's going to another 1,000, but 5,000 years is a pretty good track record. And that doesn't discount the value of new and emerging safe havens. Maybe Bitcoin will become one. Maybe. I'm actually more bullish on the crypto space today than maybe I've ever been, acknowledging that there's probably 3 to 4 years of severe pain. But I cut my teeth as a precious metals investor like 2011 to 2014 when the market was in free fall. Equities were down 70, 75, 80%, if not more in the spec sector. And everybody was running for the exit. And I didn't know any better. So I ran into the fire. And it was the best thing for me because, anybody who was still in the industry was productive. There was no easy money to be made. It was hard to earn a buck. It was real hard. And you had to be very patient. And it allowed me to graduate my network exceptionally fast. People that normally, they wouldn't have taken my call in 2010 when gold and silver are peaking and everyone in their cab drivers buying gold stocks. But in 2012, they would take my call. And so, I see those. And so, I see a similar fire burning right now in the crypto space. And I've been a passive dollar cost average investor into that industry, just a few assets. And because I don't thoroughly understand it enough to say, I know what this is, therefore I know when and why I will sell it. And if I don't have an answer to those questions, how can I have high conviction? Well, I don't yet. I think it's 14 years is too new for any technology for us to really know. But anyways, I do think the gold narrative is undervalued. I feel very passionate about that. And I do feel compelled to share this with my friends and family, and not to say go all in. Don't. That's the beauty of a asymmetric bet is that you don't have to. A little bit goes a long way. Gold is something that does nothing for you the majority of your life, but there's very few, during those very few events in history where you want to own gold, it's about the only thing you want to own, right? And those events do recur with cyclicality, right? And so don't go all in, but have a few months overhead, whatever that needs to be for you to sleep at night. But I would say study the history, understand the significance, just push away all the dogmatic evangelical gold bug. Like, don't go down the rabbit hole too far, right? Stay with logic, but have some in the safe. Have some in the safe for sure.
So that's one thing that you think people should be thinking about that many aren't yet. Anything else that emerges from all your conversations with your guests over the past year that you think is an underappreciated area of concern that people should be paying attention to?
Underappreciated area of concern. I mean, I would say that, Dunnigan, I think that we've seen a lot of very consequential policy decisions made in the last 2.5 years, and take that whatever direction you want to. I rarely think about those things as static events. I tend to understand them as part of a trajectory. And so, what does that look like up here? I'm based in Canada. We had a freedom convoy that captured the world's attention about a year ago, right? One response to that, warranted or not, was the seizure of financial assets of all those who contributed to that GoFundMe page. Now, I'm not going to comment on that, but what I would say is that opens a door, right? And the first time you take an action like that is the hardest, right? The second time it's easier, the third time it's easier. I think people should be thinking very critically about how they're actually protecting their assets and their wealth right now. And I don't care where you are located, right? I'm in Canada, so I can relate to what I'm seeing here. And I'm not overly concerned. I think that Canada's a really just, stable, and predictable country relative to most anywhere on the planet. Relativity is key here, right? But, right, unforeseen things happen all the time. And I think some scary doors have been opened over the last 2 years in many developed countries that maybe set precedent for consequential decisions that could come down the road. So, that should inspire you to drive towards personal sovereignty. That's what I believe.
I'll toss in one positive aspect of some of the astounding actions that were taken by people in positions of power over the past 2.5 years. It's almost a relief or a sanity check, a reality check for those who have been concerned that there's been this creeping, slippery slope, and sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but of unwarranted, unconstitutional increase of government, overreach, loss of privacy, loss of freedom, loss of truth that affected the individual all along the way. And when we suddenly saw so many actions being taken, I guess I would summarize it as saying it's like a revealing of the hand. Like, so people are trying to move forward in life with a lot of uncertainty ahead of us, not knowing what the future is going to be like for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren. But we're trying to move forward in a way that we feel is responsible in the best interest of our well-being and that sort of thing, with malice towards none. But it seems like increasingly we're behind enemy lines in a war. We're fighting against an adversary. We don't even know how to name them, but it seems like they definitely don't have our best interests at heart. And so it's like, if you're trying to figure out how am I going to move my life forward in an environment where there's bound to be, it seems, forces trying to take away my freedom, take away my privacy, take away my ability to know what's really going on, take away my ability to own things like land or a home or whatever. How do I move forward? So it's daunting when you don't know what the rules are or who your opponent is or whatever. But when there was this tipping of the hand of a sudden whole bunch of restrictions and everything, okay, the restrictions might have been overreach, but at least you know, wow, that's the kind of steps that can be taken within a very short period of time. So I agree with your observation that we need to be aware of how serious that is because of the precedent setting, and the next steps are easier. People say there's a slippery slope fallacy in proper debate training. You're taught that you can't say, well, this is a bad thing because it might lead to that, and that's a bad thing, and so on. But it seems that in the reality of what we're observing in life, there is a progression that seems to be one way, reducing our privacy and our freedom and increasing state control and the size and overreach of government, that sort of thing. Any thoughts based on that observation, or if you have any other top concerns you think people aren't paying enough attention to, that'd be fine as well.
I think the slippery slope fallacy is real, but there's no absolute truths, right? And yes, we get caught into catastrophizing all the time. Something happened, this is going to get so bad, right? And we get all worked up and we dramatize events all the time. But there's no absolute truth. It doesn't mean that's always the case, right? That wasn't the case. Well, we can find numerous instances in history where that wasn't the case, right? Was it the case in Germany in 1937? Like, nope, it wasn't. Those red flags were very real, right? There's endless circumstances where those flags were real. They're not always real. It's true. Like the only thing worse than fear is fear itself. Look, I mean, what I would say is you hit the nail on the head with a couple of things that I heard you say there. And one was that it's daunting when you don't know who the enemy is or what the rules are. And we were robbed of any kind of certainty over the last 3 years, right? That was removed from our scope. And humans don't operate super well. And we don't know what next week might look like in terms of basic freedoms. And, will I be able to operate my business, right? That was a real thing for a lot of people. You have children at home and you don't know the security of your income. That's a real threat. And it's no shocker to me that mental health crises have skyrocketed the last 2.5 years, because you take that away from people, oh my gosh, terrifying things happen. One trend that I'm seeing that I am quite concerned about, and I'm optimistic that we're going to get through it, but there is a very much an increase in dependence on the state, right? And what I would generalize by saying the state is that there's a safetyism culture that's crept in very slowly at first and now rapidly, right? And the evidence of this would be like the sanitization of our environment, whether that's censored content. People seem to believe now that it's someone else's responsibility to pave the road in front of them and keep you safe, right? Keep you safe from offense, from physical, from mental harm, from verbal harm, all of these things that might cause trauma, right? And, it goes against every lesson of cognitive behavioral therapy to sanitize yourself from things that maybe you've suffered from in the past, right? Or that offend you. Like it just makes you more fragile, right? The more you protect yourself from any kind of stimulus like that. And I think that we as human beings need to give ourselves a little bit more credit and understand how tough we are and adaptable we are as a species, right? We're a remarkable species. And the evidence of that is you and I chatting right here, the amount of things that we've overcome, right? And so I'm very concerned about I guess the cultural trajectory that my kids are going to end up growing up in, what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say. I have videos demonetized all the time. I don't know what to do about that, right? And I don't see this slowing down immediately. Having said that, I think eventually, whether you call that like the extreme left or whatever. You keep on chopping at the outsides of what's offensive. The circle keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? You got to remove, whoever's just, what you said just wasn't quite in alignment with what we consider politically correct today. You got to keep on chopping off those edges. Eventually there's like two people left in the circle and it eats itself. You know what I mean? And so I think we'll eventually get there, and I'll bet all day long on human progress and ingenuity. We moved from a town of 2 million people, city of 2 million people, to a town of 18,000, right? City, right? I wouldn't call it a small town, but, relative, it's a lot smaller. And the benefit of that is just, we know our neighbors now, right? We know the community, we're involved in the community. And I feel like, that intimacy with your immediate surroundings is a good environment to foster a lot of like that sort of negative conflict and finger pointing and divisions and us versus them narratives and all that stuff when you're not in direct communication and relationships with the people around you. And so we found that to abate a lot since moving to a much smaller town. That's
interesting. We had a similar move about a dozen years ago from a pretty big metropolitan area down to a pretty small town. And at first we were more, I think, aware of what amenities we lost.
Yeah,
that you have to go to 5 stores instead of 1 to get what you need, or you just can't get what you need. That sort of stuff. Or you have to drive an hour if you want to get to a nice restaurant for a special occasion or something like that. But then it crept up on us over time. It's like, but I really like that people wave to you when they drive past when you're walking your dogs out there, or all these kind of things. We just feel safe when we're outside, that kind of thing. So we've had a lot of guests who've given people advice about increasing your preparedness by increasing your sustainability of your situation that you're in, and reducing your dependency on fragile supply chains and complex systems and that sort of thing. And a lot of that involves recommendations to move to a lower population density area, as you've described. So I think you've already naturally led us in the direction I was wanting to go next, which is turning away from what are our top concerns. But as you have spoken with all these guests and you've amalgamated these ideas and formed your own summaries of them, what are some areas of particular promise or hope, some light at the end of the tunnel that you think we need to focus on and lean into? And maybe that was one you just mentioned, is get connected with those whom you live near and form robust communities. What else?
Oh, that's a big one for sure. And I know that, my family making that move was not novel. We were part of a wave. I'm seeing it, and as a consequence, the town that I moved into is growing remarkably fast right now because, we're an hour outside of a major city, but I'm in this beautiful little mountain town surrounded by glaciers and rivers, and it's gorgeous. And my 6-year-old can shred on his mountain bike, and my 4-year-old can too. And it's good. But, the benefit is that I'm aware how dependent I am, and it troubles me. And I don't know exactly how to fix that, in that if the power goes out of my house, I can't fix that. If my car won't start, I can't fix that, right? If the grocery store is out of meat, I can't fix that, right? Well, in fact, maybe you can a little bit, right? I'm not going to become an electrician and a mechanic and a farmer. It's probably not on my cards, right? I've got other things that I'm going to focus on, right? And that I'm good at, right? That I can bring value to the world, but it's probably not that. However, where I live now, I know the farmer who raises the cows that I purchased, the pigs and the chickens too, right? I know the mechanic who would work on my car when it's necessary. I have the cell phone number and a personal relationship with my plumber, electrician, and carpenter, right? And so I'm not the electrician or the builder, but having that close personal relationship with them is a step in the right direction, right? And it makes me feel less dependent because it's not a 1-800 anonymous number that I'm going to call and just hope that somebody answers and has time for me. It's in a personal relationship. I can say, Jeff, look, buddy, you got to help me out. I'm in a pinch and blah, 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 whatever, right? And he knows I'll return the favor, right? Because that's how relationships should work, right? And that's definitely dropped, and not knowingly. We didn't know this would occur, but I would say as a household, if we're all like programmed to run at some level of anxiety, when we lived in the city, we probably ran around at like an 8 out of 10. Since we've moved to where we live now, with the community we've built, I'd say we're operating at like a 4. It's just the baseline household anxiety has come down significantly. And that is absolutely lovely. Within that, like what else? I mean, we talked about sovereignty of health, and I think it's very, very, very important. And doesn't have to be complex. For example, in my household, we have a pretty strict diet. And if you eat fast food and junk food and cola and all that stuff, you'd probably be a bit lost in my pantry and wonder where all the food is, right? And truthfully, when we go out for dinner at friends' houses who don't eat like we do, and they know how restricted our diet is, to them, it seems very complicated. Oh, the Martins don't eat this, they don't eat that, they don't eat this, they don't eat that. And, the inverse way of looking at that is like, actually, it's not complex at all. It's actually the simplest thing ever. You know what we eat? We eat plants and animals. That's it. Like, maybe that's super normal, right? And our food looks like food, right? The steak looks like meat and the apple looks like an apple, right? Like, it's super basic. It's actually the easiest diet ever. It's nuts, plants, and animals. And so, yeah, it's a little step that we've taken, but it keeps us sane and healthy. And yeah,
it's funny. I had to crack up because when you mentioned that someone with average American diet eating habits would open up your pantry and think there's no food in there. I have exactly the opposite experience when we're walking through a big box store. Some of these stores, they have household goods on one side and they got groceries on the other side, and we may be there for one or the other. But when I'm walking past what they call the grocery section, I walk in there and I walk past pallet after pallet after pallet, and I say to I can hear the voice in my head saying, "That's not food. That's not food. That's not food." It's just incredible how much the stuff that's presented before us isn't
that's
really.
Why you gotta take those decisions into your own hands, because what makes it to the shelf, you can make the assumption, oh, it's FDA approved, it's got to be decent, right? It's got to be healthy for us, but it's a completely unrealistic. And I'm not slamming the FDA, right, at all. I'm just saying it's an unrealistic expectation to assume that some governing body is going to be able to take care of that for us, right? It gets back to that trust in the state or trust in yourself. And if you want to just blindly accept all the products that are thrown at you, like, that's why we're just, we're covered in chronic illness across the board at every age, right? It's like, those aren't food products. Those aren't natural. You shouldn't be eating that, right? But no, it's FDA approved. Look, nutrition information is on the back of the package, right? No, it's good. Green is good. Green is what, get out of here. Yeah. Yeah. So taking that into your own control is vitally important.
Jay, there's so much more we need to talk about, and we're going to have to circle back another time because we didn't open this up for viewers' questions as we usually do prior to an interview, because I wanted to get just the chance to introduce you to our subscribers and to ask you those key questions about key concerns and key hopes at the end of the year here. And but we look forward to having you back again. And if people have one place that they should go first to get connected with you, where should they go?
Jay Martin Show. The Jay Martin Show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes. All the content I post, aside from my weekly newsletter, is on those platforms. And the link, if you want to subscribe to my weekly newsletter, is under each video and podcast that we produce.
And folks, so that you don't miss a single episode with Jay or any of our other guests, make sure you go to libertyandfinance.com, put in your name, your email address, click submit. We'll send you a confirming email, and you've got to respond confirming it so you can opt in. Once you're in, you'll get one email per day in your inbox with our latest interviews and any specials. It's completely free. And that's it. So we're so grateful for your presence here with us, Jay, and this first time letting our audience get to meet you, get to know you, and we'll love to have you back and delve into some of their questions as well as others that we have, and look forward to your next visit here on Liberty and Finance.
Donegan, it was my pleasure. Thanks very much.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.